What's up, brother and sisters? It's your brother G World 7 underscore D. Now, I'm showing you this book right here, The General History of Africa, the Methodology, and African Prehistory. And I'm showing you this because I'm going to talk about something real quick. And it's through UNESCO, which stands for United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization. All right. I'm going to go to page 251. I talked about the Sahara. Now, here it is. Chapter 23, The Prehistory of Sahara. Now, they got several volumes. I want to say like 7 or 9 volumes of this book. Maybe I have the first 2. All right, now, here it is. The Sahara is now a vast desert covering the greater part of North Africa. It is not easy to define either its limits or its characteristics, but aridity is the factor common to all its various regions, stretching 5,700 kilometers from east to west between the Red Sea and the Atlantic, and 1,500 kilometers from north to south between the pre-Saharan Atlas and the Sudanic Sahel. Desert conditions now cover an area of nearly 8.6 million square kilometers. Yet the Sahara as we know it today has changed considerably since prehistoric times. The migrations of the peoples who lived in the region can be ascribed to the increasingly dry and hot climate, which resulted in a sparser rainfall and in the drying up of the springs and rivers. This, in turn, was responsible for the disappearance of the animal and plant life, providing substance for the population, which was forced to move back to the fringes of the desert where conditions were more clement. The chronology of the prehistoric civilization in the Sahara called for 2 comments. First, nowhere in the Sahara is the stratigraphic pattern meaningful enough to enable us to draw an accurate picture of the prehistoric stages. Secondly, apart from the Neolithic, we do not have precise dates that will make it possible to reconstruct an exact chronology. Now, I'm going to stop there, man. I'm going to stop there. What I mentioned before is that animals and different life forms lived in the desert. And in this academic book, it said that how the area dried up and how a lot of the animals either died. They didn't mention about them dying, but they had to move to certain regions where they were able to survive in some form of water as the water started to dry up. Many of the people who used the water as a great life source, the various different mega lakes and rivers that were there as a life source to travel or to fish, had to relocate to different areas. All right, they had to relocate to different areas. They couldn't stay there because their lifeline of fishing and getting food and everything was deteriorating due to the fact of the drying up of the desert. So some individuals, either they could have went east, north, south, or west. In that case, some of them went west and sailed to the Americas, which was black people already there. So you had another group of black people coming with the drying up of the Sahara to the Americas, where other black people already there who already had civilizations built there. Remember I said there was always constant travel and always constant movement. This is one of the reasons why people had to do constant travel, constant movement, because the changing of the environment around the area. In this case, it was the drying of the Sahara, the drying of those mega lakes. Many animals that once exist no longer exist due to the fact of the change of the climate within what the area is now known as the Sahara Desert, which wasn't always there. Okay, this is not me making this up. This is in this book by UNESCO. This is volume 1, and I have 2 of these. I never got the other volumes. I just got the first 2, which is United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization. I repeat, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization. This is done by UNESCO. And on the front cover, you see one of those pre-Saharan Negroes hunting. in rock art painting. You don't see no image of no white person. You see this is a Negro. That's not an image of no white person. No, it's a bow and arrow. That's obviously a Negro. And that's the image that you see on a rock art painting in the Sahara. I have a big coffee table book talks about African rock art, and it shows paintings of them Negroes hunting, fishing in areas where there's no water at now. And I'm emphasizing this because I talked about how painting on rock art in previous posts, you had in Australia, you had that in the Americas. All right? There's paintings on rock art throughout this planet of images of black folks, melanated people. All right? I know some of you don't like the term black. Black is not necessarily bad. You look at the image of the ancient Egyptians, they had an image of a person of the highest stature was portrayed as black because black represents, it's not necessarily it's death, it represents the origin, the dirt, the soil where life comes from. Plants, trees come from the black dirt's fertile soil. And being painted in the image black painted you in the highest regard. So I wish you stop saying, brothers and sisters, stop saying black is negative. That's been over recently time, it's been changed to negative. It was not always negative. All right. So, but if you don't want to use the term black, that's fine. But I'm just trying. I want to emphasize that I've been studying this for years, man. I don't take this as a joke, but I'm telling you now, is that we gotta understand all of our history. We have to understand all of our history. And this talks about is the reasons why the migrations happen. Now, people are migrating, period. But this is one of why migrations happen. And this also blows away that nonsense that you just came from West Africa. Your people just stuck in West Africa thousand years. They ain't go nowhere. They just was in some little village. No, people constantly moved. Our ancestors were already over here. But some of my brothers and sisters traveled out, and some people traveled to our land here in the Americas. There was constant movement, constantly, all the time. You have to understand this. And I just presented that one passage from chapter 23 in the General History of Africa, the Methodology in African Prehistory by UNESCO, talking about, it mentions how the area dried up and started to get sparse, so the people had to move from that region. So to say people was in, quote, your ancestors came from West Africa, that's it, and you was landlocked there for 1,000 years, that's ridiculous. Because I just read you something, it's impossible for that, because as the Sahara started to grow, the area dried up, people had to move. But here in the Americas, that's the same thing that happened to the Anasazi. Them brothers and sisters had to move. There was always constant movement because you had to understand the climate was changing. That's why it's very important also to study the history of climatology. Also, just look at population. Just study population. Even today, how people move, a lot of people moving towards the south. Well, it's a cheaper living, but also, hey, you got the warm weather. All right? So I just want you to understand that, brothers and sisters. So if you can check out this book. As I mentioned, the General History of Africa, Methodology in African Prehistory is from UNESCO. I repeat, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization. All right, peace, brothers and sisters.